I stood there while they laughed. The room was full. My manager, my team, the client. Someone made a joke about how I always say yes. Everyone looked at me. I smiled because that was expected. No one stepped in. No one changed the subject. I felt my face go warm, then empty. I wrote notes. I agreed to take on more work. I carried the moment home like a bruise. That night, alone in my kitchen, I realized something simple and final. I had trained them to use me. And they believed I would never stop asking for permission. The next morning, I arrived early like I always did. The office was quiet, lights still dim, the cleaning crew finishing up. I liked those minutes alone. They made me feel useful before anyone could take that feeling away. I logged in, checked emails, and saw 3 new requests already waiting. None of them were mine to handle, but all of them landed in my inbox anyway. That was normal. I answered them without thinking. By 9, the office filled up. Chairs rolled. Coffee machines hissed. People greeted each other. My manager walked past my desk and dropped a folder on the corner without stopping. "Can you take this too?" he said. Not a question. He didn't wait for an answer. I took it. He had been my manager for 4 years. He liked to describe himself as fair. Calm. Reasonable. He said those words often, especially in meetings. What he really valued was smoothness. No friction. No complaints. I helped him keep things smooth. I fixed mistakes quietly. I stayed late without saying so. When clients got difficult, I stepped in. When deadlines were unrealistic, I made them happen. Once, during a performance review, he told me I was reliable to a fault. He smiled like it was a compliment. Then he gave the promotion to someone else. Someone louder. Someone who challenged him in meetings and took credit publicly. I congratulated them. That was expected. The pattern was subtle. That's how it survived. Small moments stacked on top of each other. Being left off email chains, then asked why I didn't respond sooner. Being told I was too valuable where I was when I asked about growth. Being praised privately and overlooked publicly. The worst part wasn't the work. It was the way decisions were made around me, not with me. Meetings where plans were finalized before I walked in. Jokes that landed at my expense, framed as harmless. I learned to keep my reactions neutral. Silence kept things easy. Silence made me useful. One afternoon, I overheard my manager talking in his office. The door was half closed. He was on the phone, voice low but clear enough. "She'll handle it," he said. "She always does." He laughed. Not unkindly. Casually. Like stating a fact about the weather. I sat at my desk and stared at my screen until the letters blurred. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was cruel. Because it was accurate. Later that week, a client escalated an issue that had nothing to do with me. The timeline was impossible. The expectations were unclear. My manager forwarded the email and wrote, "Can you jump on this and smooth it out?" I could have said no. The thought crossed my mind. Brief. Almost unfamiliar. Instead, I stayed late. I called the client. I fixed it. The next day, in a team meeting, my manager thanked the group for pulling together. He didn't look at me. No one did. I started noticing how often comfort won over fairness. How people nodded along to decisions they privately disagreed with. How speaking up made you difficult. How being agreeable made you invisible. I had chosen invisibility because it felt safer than conflict. At home, I was exhausted in a quiet way. Not dramatic. Just hollow. I stopped talking about work with friends because there was nothing to explain. It was always the same. I was needed. I was overlooked. I stayed. One evening, my manager sent a message after hours. A simple request. Need you tomorrow. Early. I typed okay, out of habit. Then I paused. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I deleted it. Not because I was ready to fight. I wasn't. I just didn't send anything. For the first time, I didn't rush to fill the silence. After that night, something shifted quietly. Nothing dramatic happened. No argument. No confrontation. Just space where my automatic replies used to be. The next morning, my manager stopped by my desk. "Did you see my message?" he asked, tone casual. I nodded. Yes. I didn't explain why I hadn't replied. He waited a second longer than usual, then walked away. I noticed how often that pause appeared after that. Small hesitations. People recalibrating. I was still doing my job. I just wasn't doing everyone else's. That's when the pattern became impossible to ignore. It hadn't started at work. It had followed me there. I had learned it early. Be agreeable. Be helpful. Don't make things harder. In my family, that meant smoothing over tension, apologizing first, adjusting plans quietly. At school, it meant being the dependable one. At work, it meant becoming essential without being visible. I thought back to moments I'd dismissed. Times when credit was redirected. When my name was missing from reports I wrote. When I was asked to cover just this once, and it became routine. None of it was shocking on its own. Together, it formed a shape I recognized. Silence had protected everyone but me. The office ran on unspoken rules. Speak up only if you had leverage. Push back only if you were already valued. I had chosen the safer role. The one that kept things moving. The one that absorbed inconvenience so others didn't have to. One afternoon, a colleague stopped by my desk. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I looked up, surprised. She hesitated. "You've just been different." I nodded again. That word. Different. It felt accurate. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. A project meeting was rescheduled without my input. Normally, I would adjust. This time, I replied with availability instead of rearranging my life. The meeting moved. No one complained. That surprised me more than anything. I started seeing how much of my exhaustion had come from anticipation. From preparing for requests before they were made. From filling gaps before anyone noticed they existed. When I stopped doing that, the gaps became visible. And suddenly, they were everyone's problem. My manager called me into his office near the end of the week. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "Everything okay?" he asked. It sounded concerned. It wasn't. I said yes. He nodded slowly. "Good. Just making sure you're still engaged." Engaged. Another careful word. I realized then that my value to him had never been about growth or respect. It had been about predictability. About knowing I would stay quiet and make things easier. That realization settled something inside me. I wasn't angry at him. Or at the team. I was done expecting fairness from systems built on comfort. I stopped waiting for acknowledgement. I stopped hoping effort would eventually be noticed. I didn't announce any of this. I didn't need to. I simply stopped shrinking to fit. The boundary was crossed on a Tuesday afternoon, quietly, the way most important things are. I was pulled into a last-minute meeting that had nothing to do with my role. The calendar invite said optional. It never was. When I arrived, the room was already full. People avoided my eyes. That should have been the warning. My manager cleared his throat and slid a folder across the table. "We need you to take this," he said. Not asked. Assigned. It was a compliance issue. A paper trail problem. Something that required signatures, follow-ups, and risk. The kind of thing that sticks to the last person who touches it. I flipped through the pages. Dates. Names. Decisions I hadn't made. This wasn't my call, I said, calmly. The room stayed quiet. Someone coughed. Someone else checked their phone. My manager smiled slightly. We just need you to help us clean it up. That was the line. Clean it up. Not fix. Not resolve. Absorb. In the past, I would have done it. Told myself it was temporary. That being helpful mattered. That loyalty would count. This time, I closed the folder and pushed it back. I can't, I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. My manager's smile faded. Why not? He asked, still quiet. Still polite. I met his eyes. Because I wasn't involved, and I won't take responsibility for it. The silence stretched. No one defended me. No one challenged me either. The meeting ended early. People filed out without looking back. At my desk, I sat very still. Not scared. Not proud. Just done. I realized how many times I had mistaken endurance for strength. How often I had confused being needed with being valued. An email came an hour later. Carefully worded. Professional. Reassigning tasks. Removing me from certain threads. It wasn't punishment. It was distance. That was when I stopped asking to belong. I didn't explain myself. I didn't clarify intentions. I didn't chase understanding. I finished my work. I documented everything. I stopped filling silence with reassurance. At home that night, I packed a small box. Personal items from my desk. Not everything. Just enough to know I was ready. I placed it by the door and sat down. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I wasn't waiting for approval. I wasn't hoping someone would notice. I had already left, quietly, in every way that mattered. Leaving didn't look dramatic. I kept showing up, on time, quiet, competent. I answered emails. I closed tickets. I trained my replacement without being told. No farewell lunches. No speeches. Just the slow removal of access, meetings, influence. The system prefers exits that don't make noise at all, ever, again. My manager stopped copying me. Then stopped replying. HR scheduled a neutral check-in, then canceled. Budgets shifted. Priorities changed. None of it was announced. That's how consequences arrive when no one admits fault. They simply let gravity work and pretended nothing was happening around us, quietly, daily, without witnesses. I submitted notice 2 weeks later. Short letter. Clear dates. No emotion. They accepted within minutes. No counteroffer. No curiosity. The silence answered every question I used to ask. At home, I changed my voicemail greeting and felt lighter than expected for the first time, alone, finally, safely, somehow inside. My family noticed after. Fewer calls. Shorter replies. Missed holidays explained by work. No arguments. No ultimatums. Distance did the explaining. When they asked why I seemed different, I said I was tired. It was the truest answer I had left in years, and it closed doors quietly, for good. Months passed. Systems corrected themselves. Reports surfaced. Emails were forwarded. My former manager was reassigned. Nothing exploded. Nothing needed my voice. The record spoke. People who relied on my silence learned how exposed they were without it over time, steadily, publicly, through process, paperwork, audits, patience, memory, and dates alone. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I focused on work that paid me fairly and ended on time. I slept better. I stopped rehearsing conversations in the shower. Peace arrived without announcements, like a room cooling after machinery shuts off and stays quiet, stable, predictable, humane, daily, earned, enough, now. The people who expected me to carry things noticed my absence. Projects stalled. Deadlines slipped. They asked mutual contacts where I went. I heard about it later, secondhand. I didn't respond. Silence was no longer a tactic. It was my boundary set carefully, maintained, calmly, without apology, explanation, or return. I didn't win by leaving. I simply stopped losing. I walk past my old building sometimes and feel nothing. That's how I know it's over. I did what they asked. Then I left. They didn't expect that. Completed quietly, finally, without noise, without witnesses, without regret, with dignity, intact, always.